Everything has a fandom. Everything. It might not seem that way at first. If you only wish to skim the surface of popular culture, then you'll find the tentpoles of human interest quite easily. Music, movies, sports, literature, etc. Fans of these topics create their own works to showcase both their creative talents and their reverence for the source material. But what do we make of a fan work that has its own independent fan base? Enter the insanity which is creepypastas, internet campfire tales that dominated online storytelling in early to mid 2010s to this very day. One of the most popular, and arguably the one with the biggest fan base, was Sonic.exe. This story about a cursed Sonic the Hedgehog game tickled the imagination of budding developers and artists, ushering in a cavalcade of knockoffs and fan-made sequels. I first read and played it when I was young. Probably too young, in all honesty, and even back then it didn't scare me. I'm not trying to sound like a badass because I'll happily admit that I'm too much of a wimp to play actual horror games. But I didn't play it and its offshoots because they scared me. I played them because they made me laugh. I loved the terrible recolored sprites and the grainy jumpscare PNGs in the same way I loved watching those MLG Shrek meme videos in high school. All this to say, I somewhat regrettably spend time playing games I know are going to suck. That brings me to Shadow.exe. Sometimes my online friends and I exchange crappy or funny horror games on the web. One of those friends, a Discord acquaintance, sent me a new .exe game the other day. That game, as you may have guessed, was Shadow.exe. His message was brief but made the game seem worth playing. Grizzly26. Found this corny .exe game on GameJolt. Pretty funny from when I played of it. He sent me the game file of the message. After downloading and installing it, I checked around for any other folders included. It came with an empty readme file and another folder that just said moi. I usually play games completely blind, so I opted to open that folder only after finishing it. The title screen was nothing short of predictable. It was a Sonic 1 logo on a black background with nobody inside the big ring in the middle. No music or sound effects were present either. Spooky. Prepared for another mediocre horror game, I pressed start. I was taken to a character select screen styled after the file select menu from Sonic 3, complete with the music. As per usual, there were 3 characters available. From left to right, there were Charmy B, Rouge the Bat, and Silver the Hedgehog. I assumed I had to start with Charmy, since you usually had to play the characters in order in these kinds of games. Selecting him, I was taken into an act intro screen, which read, Tickled Pink, Act 0. Charmy's stage began on a bed of dry, yellowed grass and dead trees. Above him was a bright blue sky, dotted with drifting clouds and small lines representing wind. There was no music, just the sound of a gentle breeze teasing the delicate tree branches. The graphics were decent for what they were, although they were probably stolen from somewhere else. Experimenting with the controls, I found that he was only able to move left and right and perform a short hop a few inches off the ground. I thought he was able to fly, given that's kind of his thing, but no. As expected, this was a game in only the most technical way. Holding down the right key, I walked Charmy forward to certain doom. As I went, the background grew darker and the sound of wind grew more bombastic with every step. Charmy's sprite began to shake, as if he was shivering in the cold. Continuing on, the front facade of a house came into view. It was surprisingly normal looking, just an average home you would find in a post-war suburb. Upon reaching the front steps, Charmy automatically ascended to the door, signaling the start of a cutscene. He knocked on the door hesitantly, to no response. As he raised his fist to try again, it suddenly swung open and whacked him in the face. He tumbled down the stairs and fell into a heap of grass. Shakingly picking himself back up, he burst into tears. A deep, throaty laugh emanated through my speakers, one that I had never heard before. I was fully expecting the Sonic.exe, or Kefka laugh if you prefer, to show up at some point. But it seemed like this game was going to use some original audio. The laughter looped for a little bit and then cut out. I had control of Charmy again and moved him to the opened entrance. The inside of the house was just as standard as the outside. The living room was bland and beige, with lamps and old furniture serving as background details. I wasn't allowed to leave the area, so I paced back and forth and waited. The song was some kind of music box tune, like something you'd play in a nursery. but underneath the chimes I could hear something. It was a voice, not unlike the laugh from earlier. I could just barely make out some of the phrases.
Baby wants his bottle. Very bad boy. Nap time?
I had to admit that I was getting a little weirded out. I guess that was the intended effect, but still, I continued to walk Charmy around the room until the game took control again. He moved to the middle of the screen and stared straight at me. The music and voices stopped in an instant, and the only thing I could do was stare at him. The floor Charmy stood on began to creak and groan, the floorboards separating to create a wide hole. Unable to move, I watched as the young bee fell through it and down into the pitch-black basement. He stood unharmed in the center of the darkness, still non-movable. Suddenly, a lone light flickered to life above him, illuminating the entire screen. Charmy was situated between two glass tanks of pink acid, not unlike the water from Chemical Plant Zone. Hanging above them were Espio the chameleon and Vector the hedgehog, on the left and right sides of the room, respectively. They were both wearing Halloween masks, although of whom I couldn't tell. Espio's looked like a middle-aged woman, and Vector's looked like a middle-aged man. Before I could figure out what the hell this all meant, a figure appeared beside Charmy. It was a silhouette of a hedgehog from the games. To say it appeared beside Charmy wouldn't be entirely accurate, because it looked more like it was projected on the wall behind him. A shadow, if you will. I assumed this was the long-awaited debut of the titular demonic murderer, although he certainly didn't look like the shadow from the games. As quickly as he appeared, he faded away with a short laugh. After a couple seconds, a single word popped up at the top of the screen, written in big block letters.
Choose.
The Sonic drowning music started playing as Espio and Vector began lowering into the acid. Two buttons appeared next to me, one colored purple and one colored green, so I guess I was only able to press one of them, so I randomly picked green. I expected to save Vector, but nothing happened. A countdown timer appeared in the middle of the screen, starting at 10. I continued to jump on the buttons, to no avail. It was only being pressed about halfway, and Charmy was clearly too light to push it all the way down. Defeated, I let the timer count down to 0. The music cut out and the rope snapped, sending both Chaotic members falling into the acid. They writhed about as their skin peeled and sizzled in the chemicals. A new message appeared at the top of the screen.
Useless boy.
As the skeletons of Espio and Vector sunk to the bottom of the tank, Shadow.exe appeared above his first victim. He looked a lot more three-dimensional, for lack of a better term. While still a silhouette, he was now on the same plane as Charmy, no longer a background element. Raising his ghostly hands to the sky, he summoned a pink acid droplet out of thin air. It fell directly onto the young bee's head, vaporizing his flesh and leaving nothing but bone. The sound of a crying baby was the only audio that accompanied this. After cutting to black, the game brought me back to the character select screen. Just like the original Creepypasta, the file now featured an image of the deceased victim. It didn't look anything like Charmy though. It was a low quality picture of a baby with a pacifier in its mouth, tinted pink. It was cast in shadow, making its expression difficult to read. The background was made black, and the music sounded like someone running up and down a flight of stairs. I had to admit this was certainly an interesting EXE game, if a little odd. Predictably, Rouge was the next character unlocked. I selected her, taking me to the next level. This time, the stage intro card read, Insecurity, Act 1. Rouge started in a dimly lit hall of mirrors. Again, the sprites were well made, although probably not original. The soundtrack here was a single note played over and over again, gradually increasing in speed. As I moved forward, I could see Rouge's reflection in the mirror shift as she passed each one. She went from short to tall, thin to fat, beautiful to ugly. She was visibly upset as she passed each mirror, eventually just closing her eyes to spare herself the sight. The same laughter from the last stage looped as she got further and further right, culminating in a delighted roar that was so loud it made me turn the volume down. The last mirror showed Rouge in a baggy hoodie and sweatpants, obscuring her entire figure from the neck down. She opened her eyes, lowered her head, and moved to the next screen. The next area appeared to be some kind of nightclub, complete with a thumping EDM track. Weird choice, but okay. It was a bit hard to discern what was going on in the background, because the bevy of smoke machines and strobe lights obscured all the details. Rouge moved much more sluggishly, like she was fighting against the controls. All I could do was hold forward and wait. Eventually, and I do mean eventually, she got to the other side of the screen. At first, nothing happened. I was about to turn around and go back when, out of the blue, a gloved hand reached out on the right side of the screen and jabbed some kind of needle into Rouge's arm. She started back and fell to the floor, sputtering and coughing violently. The music became an ear-piercing wail that oscillated in pitch. The background began to flicker rapidly, slowly fading back to the mirror room. With one last heave, she spewed some dark yellow bile onto the floor. The screen briefly cut to black before flickering to life again, this time with a change. The letters
WHORE
were written in red on each of the 5 mirrors in the background. The game kicked me back to the character select screen, with a lock icon appearing in place of Rouge's file. Just like Charmy, the screen above the save file was now filled with a post-mortem image of her face. At least, I think that's what it was. Honestly, it looked more like a Halloween mask. Her visage shrouded in darkness. The only discernible detail were the bridge of her nose and her left eye. The background was still black, but this time there was pure silence in the audio department. With that, the only level left to play was Silver's. Tempest Fugit Act 999. Silver stood in some kind of clock tower, gears wiring and grinding in the background. The music was a soft funeral dirge interspersed with ticking noises. It actually sounded it was original to the game because it was composed using cheap MIDIs instead of real instruments. To my surprise, Silver could do something that 2 others couldn't. He could use his psychokinesis powers, as indicated by a bluish glow surrounding his sprite. All that seemed to happen when I used it, however, was him making a grabbing gesture with his hands. As I continued past the rusty clockwork, I could see Shadow.exe hiding behind the background gears. This time, he had white gloves and glowing blue dots for eyes, looking far more similar to his inspiration than before. After a short walk, I made it to the next room. I was on a patch of grass outside the tower, standing below a few platforms with wooden boxes on them. I figured that this was my time to use psychokinesis, and I was right. The game turned into a sort of puzzle platformer, as I used my PK to push the boxes into holes scattered throughout the level. Each was marked with the numbers 1 through 5, and I had to match the right box to the right numbered hole, denoted by gray blocks with the corresponding digits. Honestly, I was just glad to have some genuine gameplay in a .exe game. As the lost box fell into place, Silver automatically walked to the center of the stage. The ground began to rumble violently as a dark figure emerged from the inky night. Shadow.exe was fully revealed, appearing as one would expect him to. Shadow with black eyes and blue pupils. I was a little underwhelmed, to be honest. As he raised his fist in the air, bodies started to rise from the holes. They were decayed, with flesh barely clinging to their brittle bones, but they were still recognizable. SBO, Vector, Charmy, and Rouge were lifted like marionettes and dropped onto solid ground with a sickening thud. I realized then that things I pushed around weren't boxes, they were coffins. The victims rose to their feet, puppeteered by Shadow. I could finally move again and moved Silver forward as fast as I could. The others gave slow but persistent chase as I passed the gray blocks, tombstones I presumed, from earlier, which now read things like R.I.P. Rose and R.I.P. Charlie. I wasn't able to catch what the others said in the heat of the moment. Finally, I arrived at the rightmost grave, the only one that had not yet been disturbed. The headstone said nothing. The music faded out as Silver knelt next to the hole, panting heavily. While it seemed like a safe spot, I noticed something concerning about Silver's sprite. As the seconds passed, dark rings started to form around his eyes. His skin got saggier, his features became slimier and more gaunt, and his breathing slowed significantly. He was aging before my eyes, with some impressively done sprite work to sell the effect. As he wasted to nothing but skin and bone, the classic "time over" message appeared, jingle included. Shadow popped up behind him, wearing a sinister grin. Silver turned to face him and, scared out of his wits, backed up to get away. Unfortunately for him, that meant falling backward into the open grave. He landed with a disgusting sculch, and a new epitaph was etched onto the tombstone. R.I.P. Steven. Who the hell was Steven? With a burst of static, I was sent back to the character select. Silver had no new photo, just a question mark in its place. Lazy. Another bit of static and the screen went black. I knew the format all too well though. There had to be a final jump scare. There just had to be. Sure enough, two icy blue eyes peered out of the darkness. Red text appeared at the bottom of the screen.
You know what happens when you don't feed your hedgehog?
The full image of Shadow emerged, looking similar to the I am God picture. Wide grin, soulless eyes, realistic rendering, the works. More text appeared.
First he starves, then he dies, and finally
His eyes started bulging and pulsating rapidly.
he rots.
Both pupils exploded into a mess of maggots and green pus. Shadow's eyes were completely filled with grotesque-looking worms that crawled in and out of his sockets. Some were even caught in his teeth. The sight was grossing me the hell out more than scaring me, so I tried hitting the escape key. That only brought up a notepad that said, "You don't want me to rot, do you, Steven?" The worms had almost covered the whole screen when the game finally turned off. While it was certainly a notch above the other games of its type, it wouldn't disturb me that much if it wasn't for the ending. Still, something about the game felt very targeted. Who was Steven? An in-joke, maybe? It was weird that the programmer didn't decide to do the thing where the player's computer username is put in the game for that extra scare factor. I guess this was made for Steven specifically. I was about to shut off the computer when a new notepad opened up in the bottom left corner of the screen. It said this: "To my favorite loose end, I should note before beginning that it is not joy or passion that possessed me to write this. It was submission to the insatiable itch of hatred. Whatever becomes of this text is of no importance to me. Toss it, trash it, lock it away and swallow the key. It truly has no bearing on my conscience. That being said, it brings me nothing but glee to talk to you again. I know you missed Charlie, Rouge, and all the others terribly. We haven't seen each other since you were but a small boy. I had to hide away for a long time, so you and that harlot of a sister managed to evade me for years. I caught up with her last year. You heard, didn't you, that there was no foul play? I want you to know it was me. You were always my favorite though. I still remember that little Sonic shirt you wore when we'd play those games together. That's why I made this. A showcase of your past, present, and future. I follow, silent but ever present, a shadow. As of this writing, I have yet to find you, but I'm sure we'll meet again soon. Once you've played this, I'll know everything. Love, hate, Uncle Teddy." I had this sinking, visceral fear that I had discovered something terrible. I looked up stories involving the murder or disappearance of people named Charlie, Rouge, or Steven, and I got a few articles as a result. Back in 2005, a married couple, Vincent and Eleanor Hansen, went missing from their home along with their 1-year-old son, Charlie. The lead suspect was a family friend, Theodore Smith. He too disappeared, and the case was never solved. The Hansens' other kid, 10-year-old Rouge and 8-year-old Steven, were at school the day their parents disappeared. I vaguely remember hearing something about this case in a true crime context years back, but I don't tend to engage with that kind of stuff often. Now that I had a surname, I was able to look up what happened to Rouge. Nearly 20 years after the first incident, she was found dead from a heroin overdose. She was living on the streets as a prostitute and was not immediately able to be identified. What happened in 2005 was simply a footnote in the few articles about her death. As mentioned in the note, no foul play was suspected. Bullshit, as I had discovered. Before reporting the game to the cops, I ventured into the one folder I haven't seen yet. Moi. It was just one picture, depicting a deranged-looking man smiling at the camera. It wasn't hard to guess who that was. When I turned on my phone, prepared to call the authorities, I noticed that I had received a Discord message. In all of the drama, I had forgotten who gave me the game in the first place. The conversation was as follows: I'm Frieza Burn. Grizzly26. Sorry, I think I sent you the wrong file. I was talking about a different Shadow.exe. Don't play the one I gave you. You included a link to a Game Jolt page featuring a different Shadow.exe. Frieza Burn. Too late. Where the hell did you find it? Grizzly26. Found it on the internet.
Can't remember where.
Freezeburn.
Really? Because I can't find it anywhere on Google. It seems like it was made for a single person. Does the name Steven ring a bell?
There's a long pause in chat after this. Grizzly26.
It's okay, Kevin. We could talk about this in person. I don't live too far.
Kevin? My name. How the fuck did he know my name? Did he have my exact location too? The only way he could know is if I dashed through my computer, ran my virus scanner, and my worst fears were confirmed. Spyware. The whole thing was a trap. If he somehow found Steven's social media and sent it to him, he would require the information he needed to find him. But why the game? To distract him? To mock him? Maybe he just couldn't resist playing one last game with his old Sonic buddy. I don't know. The police were called and confiscated my computer and phone to examine the evidence. They took my personal safety concerns very seriously, and I feel confident in their ability to protect me if danger should ever arise. I hope Theodore's flair for the dramatic ends up biting him in the ass, but I'm not betting on it. Evil has a way of slipping through the cracks. Steven Hansen, wherever you are, stay safe. Update. I found a package on my doorstep today. Inside were hundreds and hundreds of maggots, writhing and twisting inside a roadkill hedgehog. A crumpled piece of notebook paper was sitting alongside it, with 2 words written in red pen.
Found you.
Alright, that was Shadow.exe by SoulCaptor, and the first ever reading I've done on this channel. As such, this was pretty awkward for me to read out loud since I have been doing that for a large majority of my life. So I probably mispronounced a couple things. I think writhing I did once, and I know you're supposed to say Stefan instead of Steven. I don't know if that's a difference or not, but I like to pronounce it as Steven. So if that annoyed you, I apologize. I'll start off by listing things I liked about this story. It was exceptionally well written for a creepypasta, with some good prose sprinkled here and there, especially like the first part of Teddy's note. Yeah, I liked that kind of aspect of discovering something you're not supposed to, or for a very specific person, which I think is done exceptionally well in a lot of horror and thriller stories. This is quite unique for an EXE story. Not the main villain not being this like evil demonic hedgehog is kind of a breath of fresh air, and it being kind of meta. I know a lot of lost episode gaming, whatever creepypastas are meta to some degree, but this is like outside of the creepypasta world, you know. Now for the things I don't really like. It has one of my least favorite modern creepypasta tropes, which is bashing old creepypastas. Just for some advice for any up-and-coming creepypasta authors out there, just hating on old stories in your creepypasta does not make it more credible. It just comes off as annoying. I don't really like it at all. It's very reminiscent to Sonic 3 Hat cartridge. I know I just said it was unique for the EXE format, but especially at the end where he contacts Teddy and he threatens him. It's not like the same, but it's pretty similar. I'm not saying it's a clone or anything. It's already been done before, and I think it was done better in Sonic 3 Hat cartridge, because this guy had no idea who this guy was. Like, Teddy left a lot of crumb trails, while the guy in the other story, he was just a mystery. And I think also Sonic 3 Hat cartridge does the mysterious part better. I'll get into that. So my biggest gripe with this story is that it doesn't leave a lot to the imagination. And I mean that with the paragraph after Teddy's note. It explains everything. And I know you could probably put two and two together with like the Rouge stage, something was up, but it just, I don't know. It doesn't. I think with stories, you're supposed to piece things together, even if you have a bunch of missing pieces. And I think a lot of good creepypastas do that. For instance, Candle Cove. But I know it can work in some stories. A very like linear. Here's the twist, and explains everything back in the story. But I just don't think it really hampers it down, you know. And that probably isn't the word to use, but you probably get what I'm saying. Sorry if I seem a bit rambly. I just have no notes to go off of. But yeah, overall I would say it's a good story. It has some flaws to it, but you know what good story doesn't have some flaws? And yeah, so since this is my first video, I'm expecting, or I'm hopefully expecting, that this will be, you know, a building block to this channel, and kind of, I'll probably read better in the next couple videos, but yeah, I want to give a big shout out to the people that supported me making this video. Shout out to SoulCaptor. Go show him support with his other stories. I haven't checked out his other stories, but give him constructive criticism, give him praise and whatnot. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Have a nice one, and see ya.